IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm your host for today, Suman. When was the last time you paid by cash to your local vendor or your cabbie? There is no denying that the various payment wallets that run on the UPI interface has become so ubiquitous and has made life simpler for all of us. The success of the UPI has prompted India to offer this as its digital public good to the rest of the world. While the success stories are all laudable, there are still some hiccups that we need to address if we want to take this truly global and make it an important part of the digital ecosystem in the world. An important step in that process is making it accessible to foreign nationals visiting India. How do we fare in this respect? What are the challenges and how can we make this better? To discuss all this with me is my colleague Josiah. Welcome, Josiah.
Thank you.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Josiah. I am a visiting research analyst from Australia. I've been in India for about 2 months now. I have a month left and I have absolutely enjoyed my time here, but I've definitely faced some speed bumps when it comes to interacting with the different digital public infrastructure.
Can you just elaborate on your experiences with the digital public infrastructure, the UPI in particular?
Sure. So with a focus on UPI, basically the issue is that because UPI is linked at the very base level with Aadhaar and with a bank account, it's hard to use UPI if you're here for an amount of time that doesn't require you to open a bank account. And opening a bank account as a foreigner in India can also be a fairly tedious process. So basically, the solution that I found was that I had to pay in cash for most things with small vendors, and then larger merchants at restaurants and hotels or things like that would have card machines, but occasionally my international cards also aren't accepted. But the main problem is using cash because it's especially true in Bangalore that all of the small vendors like your autowalas have their personal UPI codes and I don't have the functionality to pay and they often don't carry change. So that means that an auto ride that costs maybe 170 rupees, I'm paying 200 because they don't have the 30 rupees change. And it makes things very difficult for me. It means that I burn through my cash more quickly. It means that I have to constantly be thinking ahead about what notes I'm carrying and what I'll need them for. And I decided to write an op-ed about this for Takshashila on money control. And I basically went into the details of how there is a tourist wallet, but it's also limited in its functionality.
I was just coming to your op-ed. I see that this issue has affected you in a big way, and you have used the power of your words to make a very persuasive case for making the UPI interface more foreign friendly. Considering we did talk about it during the G20 and all the news around it, this comes as a bit of a dampener or a shock, for not so much shock, but a bit of a disappointment that given that we are opening all our infrastructure, or we're talking so much about the G20 and making this offering of ours so accessible to everyone. What made you write about this? Of course, your experiences there, but what were the specific challenges that you chose to, you saw that you went about writing about this?
The specific challenge refers to the UPI framework that was put in place during the G20. So it was first of all, it was very poorly advertised, but basically visitors from G20 countries that were coming to India could preload foreign money, onto a prepaid instrument that's similar to UPI, but it's not the same because they could only have the functionality to pay merchant codes. And so a lot of small vendors don't have merchant codes because there's higher costs involved. and it really limits your ability to participate in the informal economy, which of course is very important in India.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so that was the specific challenge. Could you just elaborate a bit more on, the difficulties? You've spoken about small vendors, etc., but there are other issues about just getting onto it, and you've written about a few other challenges. Could you just go a little more in detail about it?
Yes. So one of the initial challenges as well is the KYC process.
Mm-hmm.
So because foreigners visiting India don't have Aadhaar,
Aadhaar,
yes. No,
just for the listeners,
yes.
He's referring to Aadhaar.
Yes. So because we don't have that unique identity system, and we don't have that identifier, then it's very hard to do the KYC process. It has to be done in person. So for the UPI framework that was in use at the G20, it was done at Thomas Cook, where foreigners would exchange physical money, but also a lot of foreigners don't travel with physical money. And then for myself, there was no solution because I was not aware of it.
And also a G20 is a specific event. It has a start date, finish date, and there are a specific profile of guests who are coming. So it's easy to organize it for that scale of thing. But if you want to make this more universal as we want it to, then I think the KYC process comes as a roadblock. Is my reading right?
That's right. And there is, for example, there's a few startups which are trying to bridge the gap. So they'll send an agent and they will take a copy of your passport. But once again...
that's still an intermediary in the process.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, and it still takes some time. And it doesn't have, as I mentioned, it doesn't have that full functionality that Indian citizens' UPI would have.
Stay tuned to All Things Policy. We'll be right back after a short commercial break.
If we bridge these two, limitations, if we want to call this, do you think this is actually something that will benefit a large population of the foreign visitors? I mean, visitors from foreign countries here.
Absolutely. I think that we've seen from data that tourism in India is increasing. I think that the G20 is also going to be, it's very much sort of the entry of India to the world stage. I think that it's going to be a jumping off point for Indian tourism. I certainly know anecdotally that a lot of my friends, having seen my travels in India, are now much more...
desire to make it here.
That's right, yeah. Much more keen to travel here. And I think as well that it's no secret that a lot of foreigners, especially coming from Western countries, have significant purchasing power when they come to India because of the exchange rate and just because of the price of things in India. And so you would want them to be able to spend that money easily and throughout the whole economy.
Yeah. So also you've spoken about, visitors from the neighboring countries, right? Since they are a large population also that are coming to India, we tend to neglect, or we tend to put them away out of our analysis bit. But I think that part is also important because we get a lot of visitors from around these and not just the G20 countries. It becomes all the more important for us to make this more universal, etc. That kind of thing. Besides tourism itself, right? What other use cases do you see for the UPI?
Well, I think that it could become very beneficial as the underlying infrastructure could be very beneficial for other countries, and it's certainly been implemented. India has helped it to be implemented in some developing countries in Africa and other parts of the world. And I know that efforts are underway to integrate India's UPI into other payment systems. So you mentioned neighboring countries. There's been efforts to integrate it with Sri Lanka and Nepal, Bhutan, Singapore, the UAE as well. So I think that there's potential there for UPI to set the tone for faster, more streamlined payment systems. We obviously, internationally, we have the SWIFT system, which is still a closed protocol, right? And recently as well, we've seen in international politics that it's been weaponized to a certain extent. It's used in sanctions, and it's used to restrict certain countries' access to the international financial system. Whereas one of the core values of India's UPI is open source and interoperable. And so I think that that's very valuable because it takes an inclusive approach, and it would help avoid the politicization of the technology.
So just to sum up the whole thing, what is the way forward for UPI when you put it with foreign visitors or from visitors from other countries? What list down 3 things that we can do better to make this to make this more accessible to everyone?
Sure. I think the first thing is making the KYC process a lot easier and linking it with Visa and FRO services.
Mm-hmm.
And next would be making sure that when the prepaid instruments or the tourist wallets are issued, that they have full functionality, that you can pay all codes, and obviously still adhering to AML and CTF requirements. And finally, just better advertising, because I know before I came to India, because I wasn't coming for the G20 and I knew very little, I didn't know that UPI was actually a thing. I was expecting it to be a cash economy. And so I was very surprised, but foreigners need to know that in advance.
Yeah. So with these 3 things, we hope that we will make this more attractive, more useful for foreign visitors, and therefore their stay is better and more convenienced, and therefore leading to more tourists and improving the economy as a whole, right? So with that, we will close this episode. Would you have any last thoughts on this?
Yeah, finally, I would say that in addition to the benefit for tourism, India has this want to export its DPI to the world. And the best way to demonstrate the value of it is that when those foreign visitors come here, they go home and they say, wow, technology in India is so advanced. It's great. We should have that here.
Yeah, before we go, I just another thought that came is that all these restrictions that are placed on visitors, we need to balance the security as well as the convenience part of it, right? What are the security problems that probably they foresee for them to be so restrictive about the use in India?
Yeah, so I think that especially in the finance space, the security restrictions primarily speak to efforts to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism.
Oh, really? And not fraud?
Certainly fraud, but fraud, I think, certainly can still happen within a domestic economy, like within a closed system. Yeah, whereas internationally, in terms of money moving across borders and foreigners' access to certain payment systems, it's more money laundering moving across tax jurisdictions and things like that.
That they want to curb.
That is the main concern.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so to summarize, the KYC process as well as making it, more person to person rather than a business to consumer kind of in addition to being a business to consumer kind of a model, will really help this. Thank you so much, Josiah, for being on the show, and we hope our listeners found this useful.
No worries, thank you very much.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.